Welcome to another episode of Horrible History. Today we're going to be talking about lobotomies. This procedure involves severing neural pathways in the brain. It was touted as a miracle cure for those suffering from mental illness, but it would leave many with permanent damage and costing some their lives. This is Horrible History. It's the mid-1800s, and Pasteur and Koch are developing germ theory, which give people the ability to fight disease and infection. Vaccines are being developed for things like the plague, cholera, and anthrax. It's an exciting time to be tackling human disease. Mental illness continues to plague people with limited treatment options available. There are different schools of thought on the subject. Some believe that it is a problem with the physical brain, some say that it is spiritual, and some think that they are just emotionally disturbed. Patients suffering from mental illness would be packed away into asylums, which were already overcrowded and underfunded, and there they would endure horrendous living conditions, neglect, and abuse. So doctors were trying to find different treatment methods for those suffering from mental illness. One of these doctors was Gottlieb Burckhardt. Gottlieb Burckhardt, who oversaw one of these facilities, would take 6 patients and make the first attempt at damaging or removing parts of their frontal cortex. The frontal cortex controls parts of a human's behavior such as executive function, planning, and emotional response. After he had performed these procedures on these 6 patients, he would claim that 4 of them made improvement. One of them would die several days after the procedure, and one of them would take their own life much later. It's unknown whether the procedure caused the person to take their own life or not. It's kind of hard to determine the cause of such a horrific event. After these results, the whole field of psychosurgery would just be put on the shelf until the early 1930s. In the early 1930s, the person who would pick up this horrible practice was a Portuguese neurologist named Antonio Egas Moniz. He would attend the Second International Congress of Neurology in 1935. There he would watch a presentation by John Fulton and Carlisle Jacobson on chimpanzees. These chimpanzees underwent a similar procedure where they had parts of their frontal lobe totally removed. They wanted to see how these chimpanzees would react when not rewarded for completing a task and being rewarded for not doing anything. They noticed a calmer state in these chimpanzees after they had parts of their frontal lobe removed. Moniz saw what was done to the chimpanzees and thought, I want to make my patients calm, so why don't I just do to them what was done to the chimpanzees? He actually approached John Fulton with this idea, and John Fulton said, "What? Are you out of your mind?" So he totally wasn't on board. After seeing this, Moniz was like, I gotta get back to Lisbon. I gotta try this out. So he goes back home and he starts drilling holes in people's heads. This is horrific. So Moniz gets back to Lisbon and he has a new way to perform this procedure. He's going to drill holes either in the sides or in the top of the head, and he's going to pour ethyl alcohol or ethanol directly onto the frontal lobe to cause the damage for the desired effect. Yeah, that sounds crazy to me. He starts with a few patients that are suffering from paranoia, anxiety, and hallucinations, and he begins with them. So he's pouring alcohol on their brain, and alcohol is so hard to control, especially a liquid pouring over the brain. It's hard to only damage the areas that you want. So he develops a new way to do it. He creates a tool called the leukotomy, which it looks like a thin, small piece of metal that has a retractable loop at the end, where he can slide this into their brain, and then he pushes the little ring out, and then he turns it, cutting in a circular motion, almost like taking a scoop out of a brain. This is where he comes up with the term leukotomies. This first batch of 20 patients that he practiced the leukotomies on were made up of 12 females, 8 males, ranging from 27 to 62 years of age. The successes of the procedure involved apathy and lethargy and a zombie-like state. I guess you can call that calm, and it's if you can call it a success. The side effects involved diarrhea, incontinence, vomiting, fever, drooping eyelids, and rapid eye movements. And that doesn't sound too great. given the apathy and the zombie-like state too. But to Moniz, this was a success. There's an American neurologist named Walter Freeman who wants to bring this great miracle cure to the United States. But there's a bunch of neurosurgeons who are like, hey, this is not a good idea. We shouldn't just go cutting up people's brains. But Freeman gets the media on his side and he says, hey, this procedure, it'll cure schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis, any type of mania, anxiety, paranoia, all those things that are bothering you. Hey, just let me go in there and I'll start cutting up your brain. You'll be fine just like that. But see, Walter Freeman is a neurologist. He doesn't know how to perform surgery, so he has to get his friend James Watts, who's a neurosurgeon, to go along with this. James Watts, he's kind of unsure about it, but he's like, you know what? All right, let's try it. In 1936, Freeman would guide Watts through the first lobotomy performed in the United States. For the next 10 years, they would be going around performing these lobotomies in surgical theaters and at mental institutions. As much as Freeman loved drilling holes in people's skulls, he wanted to find a way to make this quicker, easier, and have a faster heal time. Freeman looked into the work of Amado Fiumberti, who would do work through the eye socket. He would use this as his inspiration for the transorbital lobotomy. He would take an ice pick from his home and practice on grapefruits and cadavers. He was practicing going right here above the eye to the back of the eye socket and then tapping it through that thin bone until he reached that frontal lobe. After he reached that frontal lobe, he would twist the ice pick a little bit, severing all kinds of neural pathways and brain tissue. Who knows what he was doing back there? But hey, he's a neurologist. He knows what he's doing. Electroshock was commonly used to render the patient unconscious prior to the procedure. This is their barbaric form of anesthetic. The first transorbital lobotomy was performed on Sally Ionesca in Washington, D.C. This was just a stay-at-home wife. And now he's over here taking an ice pick to her eye. In news around the world, Moniz would receive the 1949 Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine. What a huge award for such a terrible procedure. Back to Freeman and Watts, they're still going around poking this ice pick through people's skulls. In 1950, Watts is fed up with it. He thinks the procedure is overused and cruel, and he leaves Freeman. Good for you, Watts. Good for you. But that doesn't slow Freeman down. He's like, hey, I got it. I'll roll up my sleeves. I can get in those brains. No problem. Freeman is so well known, he even performs a lobotomy on John F. Kennedy's sister, Rosemary Kennedy. During the procedure, she's told to recite the Lord's Prayer, or God Bless America, or count backwards. When she's no longer able to speak or her words get too garbled, he knows the ice pick has gone too far. What a great measuring tool. This procedure would cause her to lose her ability to talk or walk, requiring care for the rest of her life. She would spend most of her life in an institution far from the public eye. Freeman also performs a lobotomy on a 12-year-old boy named Howard Dooley. He has the consent of his parents, but Dooley would later go on and write about the horrific recovery from his lobotomy. But Freeman had a great business going. He got this down to $25 a pop. Think about it. We could institutionalize somebody for their whole life and it would cost the state, who knows, $40,000 a year, when $25 go into your eye sockets, taken care of, done. You're good to go. There was definitely an economic incentive for this procedure when it cost the state so much to institutionalize and take care of those that couldn't, when they could just pay for a $25 lobotomy and think, hey, they're calm, they're zombie-like, they're apathetic. That's great. Saves the state so much money. In 1967, Walter Freeman would perform his last lobotomy on Helen Mortensen, who would die several days later from cerebral hemorrhaging. After Helen Mortensen, Freeman would be banned from performing these surgeries. Like, what does it take for you guys to take these ice picks out of his hands? He's literally putting them into people's eyes. It's estimated that Freeman performed over 3,500 lobotomies by the late 1960s. 19 of these were on minors, one of them being a 4-year-old. Overall, there was 40 to 50,000 lobotomies performed in the United States during the entire period of when lobotomies were being used. It's crazy because lobotomies aren't even banned to this day. Just nobody performs them because nobody thinks it's a good idea to take an ice pick and stick it in someone's brain. Neurosurgeons around the world began to frown on lobotomies because of their barbaric and cruel nature. Lobotomies are not used today to treat mental illness. Today we have antipsychotic, antidepressant, and other psychoactive drugs that have been safer and more effective in treating mental illness. Nobody performs lobotomies today, thank God, but there has been controversy over the Nobel Prize that was given to Moniz and whether it should be rescinded or not. Tell me what your thoughts are. Thanks for watching this episode of Horrible History about lobotomies. It really means a lot to me to have you all here. Let me know if you guys think that this was the worst surgery ever performed. Leave it down here in the comments section and I'll be sure to get back to all of you. Thank you all and take care of yourselves. Make sure no ice picks go in your eye.